You're about to learn from one of the most successful real estate investors in the country. It's Mr. Jay Connor, and he's flipped and rehabbed over 500 properties in Eastern North Carolina. He's automated his seven-figure businesses so well that he works less than 10 hours a week in his real estate investing business. So he's figured out quite a bit, and he's helped 2,000 real estate investors discover how to raise private money without ever asking for money. So we're here to get some real estate secrets, some money secrets, business mindset, who knows what. Mr. Jay Connor, how the heck are you?
Robert, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for inviting me to come along and talk about what I'm so passionate about, and that being private money for real estate. And the reason I'm so excited about it is because this one strategy that I learned how to do all the way back in 2009. Since that time, Robert, I've never missed out on a real estate deal for not having the money.
Ooh, nice. And the real estate and money, it can be kind of a scary thing to learn about, to hear about, right? Because you always hear about how like the funding falls through, or like people being like over leveraged, or the timing being wrong. And so to have that problem solved somewhat, or for you to have a technique, that's great to hear about. And so to dumb it down for the layperson, when we're talking about private money, like what does that mean?
Yeah. The easiest way to describe it is that to tell what private money is not. So a lot of people, real estate investors, they confuse private money with hard money. So hard money is most of the time an institutional lender, a broker that has gone out and raised money from individuals to invest in their fund. And then the hard money lender turns around and then loans that money out at a higher interest rate, charges origination fees, and et cetera, to the real estate investor. And the interest rates are typically these days, in the high 11%, 12%, with points and origination fees being as much as 3% or more, 4%. Private money, the way that works is the real estate investor is borrowing money from another individual, another human being, with no broker, no originator involved. It's a single direct transaction between the real estate investor borrowing directly from the individual, the private lender's investment capital, liquid funds, and or their retirement funds. A private lender can take current retirement funds, transfers them over to a self-directed IRA company approved by the IRS, and then the interest that they earn is either tax deferred or tax free, depending on the type of retirement account they have. But they don't have to use retirement funds. The private lender can just use, liquid investment capital as well. So private money, single transaction, one-on-one between real estate investor as the borrower and the individual private lender think of the private lender as the bank. The private lender does not own any part of the property. They're not joint venturing. They're getting a straight interest rate, just like a bank would. I've been paying my private lenders 8%, no points, ever since February of 2009. And they love it, particularly when they compare it to what they can get or what they can't get in the local bank.
Oh yeah, and that is the joke of it, right? Is that the banks, they're making big money, but then if you bring your own money into the bank, as soon as you put it in the bank account, like it's not just sitting there; they're putting that to use no matter what it is, and then they give you such a small percentage. And so, like, I'm curious about, like, if someone's looking to fund this real estate deal, like when would they choose to use private money versus the bank? Is it all the time, or are there certain circumstances?
Well, it depends on what your exit strategy is going to be. Typically, private money, like all of my notes, most of them are not more than 2 years. A lot of the single family houses, even to this day, we flip. And so we might not be using the money for more than 9 months or so. You could use private money, a private lender, to invest in a house, but let's say that you wanted to hold on to it long term as a rental, if you want to do that. Well, you could use private money to fund it, get it fixed up to where you want to be renting it out, and then you could refinance it, with an institutional lender, for the long term. So it comes back to, what's your exit strategy?
Okay, well, fair enough. And so I appreciate how, like, we talk here on the podcast about generalities, but you also have the tidbits, and you say, like, for example, the like self-directed IRA. You're like, well, you're kind of pointing us in the right direction, but then everyone's situation is unique, so then there's like that extra level of detail. And so if someone's listening to this, they say, okay, great, private money seems like a good route to take. Like, how does the lender and the other side of it, how do they kind of get in contact with each other? Because, like, you say, well, I'll borrow from this bank, I'll contact all the banks. If someone is looking to find private money or lends their money private, like as private money, do you have a directory, or how does the connection happen?
Yeah, that's a great question, Robert. It's interesting. Carol Joy, my wife, and I, we've been doing this since 2003. We've been borrowing private money since 2009, and over these years, we have had 47 unique individuals that have loaned us money on our deals. And what's interesting, Robert, is that not one of our 47 private lenders ever heard of private money or private lending. They never heard of self-directed IRA companies until I put on my teacher hat, which says private money teacher. So I just lead with education. I I expose people in my own network. So the relationship is in place first. That's critical. So these are all people that I already knew, or I grew my network, got very involved in business networking international, got referred to other people. And so the relationship is in place first. And so, I think of myself as a doctor diagnosing as to whether somebody has a problem. The definition of malpractice is offering a prescription before you have a diagnosis. And so, just in everyday conversations, I may ask someone that I'm visiting with, I'll say, by the way, with the markets these days, are you investing in anything that's giving you a really, really nice rate of return? Well, if they say, yeah, I made 15% in XYZ last year, well, I just diagnosed they don't have a problem. I'm not going to talk about my private money lending opportunity. But on the other hand, if they say, yeah, I've got this 401k in this company I used to be in and it's going nowhere. Well, I just diagnosed I may have a solution to their problem of not getting a high rate of return safely and securely. So again, it starts with the relationships first, and then I talk about the private lending opportunity. One mistake, one lie, if you will, that a lot of real estate investors believe because they've been told wrong. They've heard the guru on stage say something to the effect of just get the deal under contract and the money will show up. That is the most stupid thing I ever heard in my life. Or they'll say, get the deal under contract because money finds good deals. Well, that's like backwards, right? It makes so much more sense to me to get the money lined up first without any kind of a deal attached to it. And they let me know how much they want to invest. They love the opportunity. They love how they're protected. I teach them how it's conservative, loan to value, et cetera. And then I simply call them up with what I call the good news phone call. And, 2 or 3 weeks after they've told me how much money they want to invest, and I deliver on my promise. I put their money to work. They're waiting for the phone call. They're waiting for the good news phone call. There's no pitching. Ever since this time I started, Robert, I've never asked anybody for money. I simply educate and then fulfill and deliver on my promise of being able to invest their money for them.
Very nice. So there's a logical step-by-step process. You get the money first, and then you find those good deals. And I'm curious about what your flavor or preferences of real estate is, because everyone's different, right? Some people are all about the apartment buildings, or the burr strategy, things like that. So, like, I know everyone's different, everyone's got their own take, but as far as when you're looking for whatever a good deal is, are you looking in like certain areas, certain types? What's your favorite?
Yeah, that's a great question. Private money can be used for any asset class of real estate: self storage, land, commercial, apartments, single family. So, all my experience over all these years has been using private money for single family houses. That's just been my go to ever since day one. And depending on the asset class, depends on how you structure the private money loan. So with single family houses, we give our private lenders the same exact protection as the local bank. Think of the private money lender as the bank. So we're not borrowing unsecured funds. We're going to give them a collateralization of that note. Most states call it a mortgage. Here in North Carolina, it's called a deed of trust. So they get a promissory note, they get a deed of trust that's collateralizing that note. We name the private lender as the mortgagee on the insurance policy. That gives them another layer of protection. If there's a claim against that insurance policy, the check's made payable to the private lender and to your entity. Well, the private lender's got to sign off on that check. We name them as additional insured on the title policy. So they're getting all the same protection as the local bank would get. On the other hand, if you're using private money, say for an apartment complex, well, you're not going to be doing what's called asset-backed debt. What I just described is asset-backed debt. Promissory note with a mortgage or a deed of trust collateralizing that note. That's why the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission, does not regulate what we do with private money because it's asset-backed debt. You got a private lender, you got a property that's collateralizing that note. On the other hand, if you're raising private money for a commercial deal or for apartment, et cetera, apartment complex, then it's not going to be what I call one-offs. It's not going to be a private lender and that one property. You're going to have multiple private lenders that are investing in a fund. And then the operator uses that combined fund from different investors, private money lenders, investors, to go do the project. Well, now the SEC is regulating that, right? All kinds of disclosures that have to be done. You'll be using an SEC attorney to draw up a private placement memorandum, et cetera. So it's all the same money, but it's structured differently depending on the type of deal that you're doing.
Very cool. I love hearing about this, right? About the possibilities and the just the structures that can be created, and we can get to some interesting solutions here. And you mentioned a little bit earlier about like exit strategy. So if someone is like, okay, well, how do I plan my exit ahead of time, or do I just let it ride? Like, what's your thoughts on an exit strategy?
So with single family houses, there's all kinds of exit strategies. You can get a single family house under contract and you can wholesale it if you want to, and just collect an assignment fee from another real estate investor who's actually going to take that deal down, do the rehab, and et cetera. Or you can stay in the deal. You can renovate it. That's what I do with most of our properties, and put it in the multiple listing service and cash it out. Or you can do what I've done a lot of times as well, is you can buy the property and then you can sell it on lease purchase or rent to own and collect a large non-refundable lease option deposit. You are responsible for repairs the first 30 days. And after that, your lease purchase or rent to own buyer is responsible for all repairs. They have the mentality of owning that home. We just haven't transferred the title or the deed until they get ready for a mortgage. Or your exit strategy could be work for equity. Let's say the home is just in need of cosmetic repairs, but all the major components are working and there's no, structural damage to it. Well, you don't have to do anything to that house. You can sell it on rent to own or lease purchase, work for equity, give a discount off the price of the home, sell it on lease purchase, and now the buyer, the tenant buyer we call them, is responsible for all the cosmetics in that home. So that's one thing that I love about the single family business, is that there's multiple exit strategies that you can choose from depending on the deal you got.
Very cool. Yeah, you're so right. It's amazing what's possible for both that lender and the borrower, and just to make a deal happen when otherwise it might not. But then you say, hey, here's this vehicle that can work. And so it sounds great, but people always hesitate, right? There's always looking out for the danger. So where do people maybe sometimes go wrong making their deals?
Well, that's a great question. Well, one thing they go wrong with is they pay too much for the property. right?
Yeah.
So emotion should never come into play into the decision making process on making an offer on a property. Now, I'm talking specifically here about single family houses. Um, Paying too much for the property. I have a formula. When you're using private money to fund the deal, then let the formula make the decision as to what is the absolute maximum that you should offer on a property. The protection is not getting the estimation of repairs exactly right. The risk is mitigated in your offer. Is the offer low enough to account for what we call Murphy factor, right? Murphy shows up in every house that you're renovating. Sometimes his cousins and uncles show up unexpectedly. So the offer is the biggest mitigation of the risk. And so that's on the real estate investor side. On the private lender side, is we want to make sure we do not borrow more than 75% of the after repaired value on a single family house. That's going to give a 25% equity cushion to the private lender. Now, I didn't say 75% of purchase price. I said 75% of the after repaired value. So to use small numbers for this to make sense, let's say I'm making an offer on a single family house that has an after repaired value of $200,000. Well, I might be, and let's say the rehab is 35,000. Well, I'll buy that house all day long for $100,000, 50% of the after repaired value, because the seller is either personally distressed or the property is distressed and they don't have the money to put in the property. But if I can borrow 75% of the after repaired value of 200,000, that means I can have my private lender wire into my real estate attorney's trust account $150,000. If I'm buying it for 100,000, I have what's called a $50,000 excess cash at closing. Who wants to get paid to buy properties? I never take any of my own money to the closing table to purchase. It's all funny with private money. Bring home all the cash needed for the renovation and still have some left over for carrying costs and et cetera.
Very nice. You know your stuff, so this is wonderful to hear about the ways, the do's and don'ts, and what is possible. If as far as just the nuances of what you teach here, right? Private money and real estate. Do you think there might be a missing question that's really important that I should be asking you? I just don't know what to ask you.
Well, regarding private money, again, the biggest misconception is new capital raisers, new real estate investors. They overcomplicate it. This is very simple business. Once you understand the important, moving parts and the components, um, you want to have a great relationship with your real estate attorney or title company, whoever you're doing closings with, because when we make our offers offering to close within 7 days. Well, you're not going to be able to close in 7 days unless you got a great relationship with your private lenders. The money's ready to be wired. You got a relationship with your closing attorney or title company that can prepare closing documents, very, very quickly. And that's one way that we get a lot of offers accepted that other real estate investors don't. We close in 7 days. Well, if they're occupying the house, we'll go ahead and give them 50% of their proceeds. 7 days from now, they get to stay in the property for free for whatever length of time we both agree on. And then they get the other 50% of their proceeds when they have vacated the house. So
Hmm.
that tip right there will get you a lot more offers accepted.
Yeah, that's a nice touch. Well, I'm amazed every couple of minutes in our conversation about the creativity, and I feel like a common lesson I'm getting this last couple of weeks talking to people like you is this idea of like striving for simplicity, and that simplicity does not mean careless or lazy. It means more being prepared, and it means maybe you've put in extra work to take something that it could be a mess, could be complex, and make it simple. And that way it can be something that you can wrap your head around. You get to that logical conclusion, that 7 day closing, and then you can rinse and repeat and have a real business that kind of fulfills your hopes and dreams and gets you to where you want to go. And so if someone says, I'm extremely impressed by what Mr. Jay Connor has to say, I want to find out more, what are some next steps?
Well, the next step I would recommend is I've got three gifts that I'll share. First is one common question I get, Robert, is how do I even start a conversation with a potential private lender? And so I've written what's called the curiosity opener script, how to start a conversation with a potential private lender. And your audience can download this script absolutely free. It's a PDF at www.jayconner.com/scripts. Secondly, my national best-selling book is called Where to Get the Money Now. How and where to get money for your real estate deals without relying on hard money lenders or institutional lenders. And I'll express mail this book out to your listeners. I'll autograph it. And it's $20 on Amazon, but don't spend $20 on it. Just cover shipping and handling, and I'll rush it out to you. jayconner.com/book. jayconner.com/book. And then in addition to that, I have a live private money conference. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 3-day event. It's an amazing event. You can read about all the details at www.theprivatemoneyconference.com, theprivatemoneyconference.com. It's a $3,000 event, but your audience gets to come for only a $97 registration fee to nail down 2 seats for them to attend in person. But all the details are there on that website.
Very nice and extremely organized. So that way, according to whatever our level of interest is, right? If we just say, well, hey, I'm just a little bit curious, dip my toe in the water, you can go to jayconner.com. That's CONNER/scripts to figure out how to get that conversation started. If you say, you know what, that's good, but I want to know more of the details, that's jayconner.com/book. Where for just you pay shipping, then Mr. J will express that amazing book that he sent you. And then if you say, all right, I'm actually a serious person and I want to go to that in-person event, then you go to theprivatemoneyconference.com and stop hoping and wishing and dreaming and actually look into some of this stuff and figure out some next steps and solutions and change your situation and get to this private money world, and you'll be so glad you did. So we'll go there right now to one of those 3 choices. That's jayconner.com/scripts, jayconner.com/book, or theprivatemoneyconference.com. We'll have those links under the podcast. But before I let you go, Mr. J, it's time for the scary part of the show where I try to stump you. I try to put you on the spot by asking you about a fun or interesting quote or lesson that has served you. So what comes to mind as far as a fun or interesting quote or lesson?
One of my favorite quotes is, successes are scheduled. I really don't believe in a to-do list. A to-do list is great, but you got to get it on the calendar. And so schedule what you want to accomplish on your calendar. My life, my business runs strictly by the calendar. And so again, successes are scheduled. They don't happen by accident.
Fabulous. They call that sage advice, Mr. J. Schedule those successes on the calendar, and we'll see you there at jayconner.com to look into some of these real estate possibilities and opportunities. And thanks so much for stopping by and dispensing your knowledge for us.
Robert, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you right back.